Laden. Let's go now, though, to local politics. Joining me on our panel this afternoon from Canberra, the National Senator John Williams. We'll also be joined by Kelvin Thomson from Melbourne shortly. John, starting with you, though, let's just look at domestic politics firstly. We saw another news poll today. Tony Abbott's satisfaction rating was up 6 points. The government today has been pretty quick to say that this shows that the scare campaign he's running on the carbon tax and asylum seekers is working. Do you think that this is going to give your party more encouragement to continue down that line?
Well, I actually look closer at the Labor vote, and it's, every politician has a look at polls. Some might say, oh, we don't pay any attention to the polls. I can assure you we all do. And looking at the Labor primary vote at 33%, that's the one I watch the closest, because Labor knows unless they have a 4 in front of their primary vote, they're in trouble come election time. I think the polls are pleasing. We've seen a resurgence in support for Tony Abbott. I think that's good, and I think that's deserved. Tony's a good bloke. He's out there working extremely hard. And the polls, I think, are pleasing, but long time till the next election, Ashley, so we've just got to make sure that we are, in the eyes of the Australian people, an alternative government, that we can do the job properly. I'm confident we can do that, and we'll just see how things pan out as we go along over the next couple of years.
Would you rather, though, that Tony Abbott spent more time spruiking the coalition's policies as opposed to bagging the government's? That is the criticism we keep hearing from the government, is that Tony Abbott doesn't have his own agenda.
Well, there's one thing in opposition, Ashley, if you start releasing your policies, the government starts copying them. We've seen that for years in New South Wales, when Barry O'Farrell was reluctant towards the latter part, say the last 12 months, to release any more policies because the Labor government copied them. We don't want to release all our policies yet. We'll have a lot of policies. There'll be plenty of time before the next election where all Australians will know the policies of the coalition, and I think that's a wise move to do exactly that. The government is the government. They're only there by the skin of their teeth, but they are in power, and they're bringing in this carbon tax, and it's costing them dearly. And I just find it amazing that Wayne Swan says in this budget next Tuesday he's looking to create another 500,000 jobs and bring in a carbon tax that threatens jobs in Australia and moving industries overseas. I just find that so ironic.
Well, today we have seen Wayne Swan out and about, of course, as you referred to, the budget. It's being handed down in a week's time. Wayne Swan said today that it's actually the most complex budget he's had to shape. It is, of course, Wayne Swan's fourth budget. It's Julia Gillard's first, though, as Prime Minister. Here's what Mr Swan had to say this morning.
We've got a very big task on our hands this year. This is my fourth budget, and in some ways it is a more complex budget than the previous three. That means a greater degree of challenge in terms of explaining the competing forces that are occurring in the Australian economy and the differing trends that are occurring in the Australian economy just over, say, the past 6 months. So, yep, big challenge on our hands. I'm up for it. I'm going to get stuck into it.
The Prime Minister's also been out this morning. She visited a school in Canberra to announce that on budget night the government will say that it's going to spend $200 million to help schools and students with disabilities. Here's Julia Gillard.
This $200 million of additional support will be available to assist schools right around the country, all schools in all school systems. The way in which the money will be invested will be in accordance with my vision that we want to make a difference for every child in every school.
John Williams, it's hard to argue with spending money on kids with disabilities, but what did you make of those comments from Wayne Swan? He's been laying the groundwork for a tough budget. Do you think this budget needs to be as complex as the Treasurer says?
Well, the problem we've got, Ashley, is a huge amount of debt, $185.5 billion as of last Friday. And now he's got a situation where he's got to stop extending the debt. The Parliament has only passed legislation to borrow as much as $200 billion. We're getting close to that. He's got to bring the budget back in order. He's got to also realise that there are many sectors in Australia still suffering. In regional Australia, I know there's some great things out there. The price of lamb, the price of mutton, the price of wool, even the price of beef have improved against a surging Australian dollar at $1.10. But he's got to get the budget back into the black and take the pressure off interest rates, because the last thing we need is another interest rate rise. Hopefully we won't have one today.
Yeah, and of course course, most economists are saying that we shouldn't be expecting another interest rate rise this afternoon when the RBA does hand down its decision a little later. We'll, of course, have full coverage here on Sky News of that when it does happen. Let's bring in from Melbourne the Labor MP, Kelvin Thomson. Kelvin, we keep hearing from the opposition that Wayne Swan's just making excuses about how hard and complex this budget needs to be, he says, because of the two different tracks the economy is going on. But a lot of economists are saying, come on, let's get real. We've got this big wave of investment. It's not as hard as the Treasurer is saying it is.
I think it's pretty clear, Ashley, that the government is highly committed to bringing the budget back into surplus next year, and in order to do that there are hard and difficult decisions which need to be made, and it is the case that some sectors of the economy are moving much more rapidly than others, and that provides complex policy challenges. I think the Treasurer has made clear that he intends to deal with those challenges, and I was delighted to hear this afternoon that the government has announced a $200 million program for young people with disabilities in schools to be rolled out next year. This is a government which is very concerned to assist young people with disabilities, and we've made announcements in the area of autism. We've made an announcement concerning access to early intervention, up to $12,000 for families where children are experiencing things like Down syndrome, Fragile X syndrome, cerebral palsy, various other impairments. The government is moving to bring those things in from July the 1st. So I think we're showing very clearly that we have good priorities.
Well, another thing that's being shown very clearly this morning is in today's news poll. It's another terrible poll for the government. Again, the coalition is ahead on a two-party preferred basis. Tony Abbott's satisfaction rating is up as well. Tony Abbott was out this morning again campaigning against the carbon tax. This is what he had to say about those polls.
I look at the field evidence rather than the polls, and the field evidence is that right around Australia, workers are more and more concerned about the impact of the carbon tax, not only on their cost of living, but on their jobs. Now, there are about 300 people directly employed at this plant. The company employs about 700 people around Australia. There's about 4,500 people whose employment indirectly depends upon this business, and yet this business will be needlessly penalised by the Prime Minister's carbon tax.
Kelvin, these polls are getting pretty boring because they are telling us the same thing pretty much every fortnight, which is that your government isn't popular and that the carbon tax is feeding into that.
Look, it's fair comment, Ashley. The poll's not particularly good, but there's nothing particularly new in it either. That's been the case for some time, and it may well be the case that the polls don't improve for us until the carbon price is resolved. It seems clear enough to me that many Australians are doing it tough in terms of cost of living pressures, things like electricity prices and council rates and housing mortgages, rents, all of those things are imposing cost of living pressures, and I think that is being reflected back in opinion polls.
Were you surprised to see the Prime Minister didn't get any sort of boost from that international trip she did last year? Usually we see leaders getting a bit of a boost at least when they do go and shake hands with a lot of important people overseas.
Oh, well, I think the polls showed a small boost, but I think it's unwise to get involved in discussing the polls' minutiae because, as you know, that there are limits to their accuracy and they do move around from week to week and fortnight to fortnight. So I don't think there's a whole lot to be gained by delving into the minutiae of them. There's a slight improvement there.
John Williams, let's bring you back in. There's probably a bit you want to respond to there. What about Kelvin's arguments at the beginning in response to the budget, and in particular that announcement today about disability spending? Is the government right to have such a focus on education, skills, training in this budget? That's a pretty fair priority for this budget, isn't it?
It certainly is, Ashley. And just 2 weeks ago I was at a school in Guyra in the Northern Tablelands of New South Wales, where that school took on a very, very disadvantaged student, and we've got to do the best for these kids. They may have a physical disability, a mental disability. We've got to give them an opportunity in life, and I'm sure that everyone would welcome some extra spending of the government in that field, because it is very, very difficult, especially I know in regional areas, for smaller schools to actually establish themselves and prepare for someone who's, you know, very, very disabled, unfortunately, and the school's doing a good job there. I don't think there'll be any argument over that, but for Mr Swan saying, you know, this is a hard budget, he's never had a hard budget yet. His first budget back in 08-09 of 22 billion surplus ended up 27 billion in the red. I don't think he's made a hard decision yet, and he's probably got the blowtorch on him now.
Well, 1 week to go and all will be unveiled. Kelvin Thomson, just finally, I do want to get your thoughts, of course, on the death of Osama bin Laden. How concerned are you about reprisal attacks today?
Well, Ashley, Osama bin Laden was an evil bastard with no redeeming features, so I think his death is welcome, frankly. Barack Obama is my hero. I remember when I was a kid there was a song that used to go, "The Man Who Shot Liberty Valance." Well, I don't know how many people remember that, but I thought of that when I
Gene Pitney,
heard the news. Yeah, Gene Pitney, indeed, John. I'm glad you remember it as well. But I think it will make the world a better place, and I hope it will make the world a safer place. But of course, we all do need to continue to be alert. The threat rating continues to be listed as medium, and people need to be alert and mindful of security issues.
John, what are your thoughts about how this is going to affect global terrorism? Do you think the world is a safer place now?
Well, the world's a better place without him, Ashley, and I agree with Kelvin on that. One thing about this man and the money he had, he inherited $250 million. I don't know how much of that he smuggled into Pakistan or wherever he was during those years in hiding, but I hope that cuts off the money supply so that the ammunition, the bombs, the weapons cannot be bought from that group that has caused so much damage right around the world, and I think that's a good thing we need to look at as well.
Okay, John Williams and Kelvin Thomson, thank you for your insights today. We do appreciate it as always.
Good to talk with you, Ashley. John.
And I just do want to note the breaking news that you can see there on your screen. We are getting reports that one person has died, others are injured after a tornado has ripped through Auckland. We'll get some more details for you on that in the next news bulletin. For now, though, we're going to take a quick break. When we come back, more analysis on the role Pakistan may have or may have not played in tracking down Osama bin Laden. Stay with us.